Sancone. Fox Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry has the very latest on the story. He joins us now. Ed?
Tucker, great to see you. It's the 18th district in Pennsylvania, includes the suburbs of Pittsburgh. Went for President Bush by 20 points in 2016. Should be easing pickings for his party, in part because his tariffs on aluminum and steel are very popular because it actually means jobs for real people. But Democrats have this young candidate cut from central casting. You mentioned him, Conor Lamb, narrow lead, though he's all but running from national Democratic leaders, promising to vote against Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. And as a former prosecutor and Marine, he's made a direct appeal to the union workers who snubbed Hillary Clinton last time around. The president labeled the Democrat Lamb the Sham at a raucous rally on Saturday night, slamming Lamb for opposing his tax cuts and immigration crackdown. But folks I've spoken to at the White House are very nervous about their candidate, Rick Saccone, who struggled to raise money and has struggled to rally the base. In the final hours, Saccone also brought in Donald Trump Jr., borrowed the family playbook, vowing to drain the swamp and charging the president's opponents hate the president, America, and yes, even God. If Lamb takes this GOP district, the media will have its narrative that the GOP is easy pickings in the November midterms. If Saccone wins it, it will suggest the president's coattails are stronger than Democrats think. Keep it glued to Fox tonight. We expect the result around 11 p.m. Eastern, when I will fill in for Shannon Bream. But also stay glued to Fox because Tucker is really awesome.
You're a great reporter,
Ed.
Ed.
Put that in there.
A great reporter, and I appreciate it. Good to see you.
Man.
President Trump traveled to the state of California today to review 8 separate prototypes for his proposed wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. While there, he said this.
The round piece that you see up here, or you see more clearly back there, the larger it is, the better it is, because it's very hard to get over the top. It's really deterrent from getting over the top. Who would think? Who would think? But getting over the top is easy. These are like professional mountain climbers. They're incredible climbers. They can't climb some of these walls. Some of them they can. Those are the walls we're not using.
Democrats in Congress oppose providing funding for the wall, of course, but some go further than that. Recently, some on the left have called for ending all federal border enforcement, period. Senator Kamala Harris of California says that ICE should be abolished entirely. Washington Post editorial today agrees. How is that distinct from having totally open borders? It's not yet clear. Henry Fernandez, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, joins us tonight. Henry, thanks for coming on.
Good to be here, Tucker.
So there's obviously a lot of concern about illegal immigration, whatever you think the best solution is. What do you think the downside for American citizens is of illegal immigration?
Well, let's start with this wall that Trump wants to build. And let's remember that he first told us that it was going to be built and paid for by the Mexicans. They've said they won't do that.
I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off, and I'm happy to talk about the wall. But first, I want to get to the predicate for the wall, which is the concern about illegal immigration. Why should we be concerned about it? What are the downsides of illegal immigration for American citizens?
Well, I think you're the one who has this big concern. Immigration, undocumented immigration, people coming into the U.S. without documents or overstaying visas. Yes. Those things are all way down. They've been down virtually every year for some time now. So it's actually not a very significant problem. Instead, this is really something that Trump is drumming up in order to scare people. And it really doesn't have much basis as a serious problem right now. So you don't think that
when people come over, because people do come over, I mean, there are a lot of people apprehended at the border, and there are, of course, more than 10 million illegals living in this country. You don't think that American citizens are hurt in any way by that or have any legitimate reason to be concerned by it?
Again, I'm trying to understand what the big concern is here. What we're talking about is a border wall that would cost somewhere between $60 and $120 billion, money that would just be taxpayers' dollars wasted for something that won't work. The solution,
but hold on.
How do you overcome a 30-foot wall with a $32-foot ladder that you can get for $300 at Home Depot?
I'm familiar with the bumper sticker, though. I wonder if you're concerned at all about the effects on employment. So just to give you one among many examples, there are 7 million American prime-age working men who've dropped out of the labor force. And they tell, there's a recent report by the Fed on this, they tell researchers that the wages that they're competing for are too low, and one of the reasons is because of competition from immigrants. So you don't think that that's a concern at all? That doesn't bother you at all? Is that something you've looked into? Should people be worried about it?
Well, I think if we look at economic analysis, no, that should not be a significant concern for people because immigrants help build the economy, which raises wages. What we've seen is wages are now, as unemployment has come down close to 4%, wages are starting to raise. That's what we would expect in this economy or any economy.
Then why are there
immigrants are essential to growing the economy.
But let me ask you though, why, if we have approximately 11 million people here illegally, and we have, just to name one among many numbers, 7 million American citizen men of working age not working, why wouldn't we prefer the citizens to be working instead of the people who are here illegally? Should we give priority to our citizens, I guess is my question. Do you think that we should?
So I really feel like the premise of the question is missing just basic economics. If we want to create jobs, we need a robust entry of immigrants into this country. That's what allows us to grow jobs in this country.
But we have 11. Hold on, we have 11 million. So no, we have 11 million at least. The number may be far higher, but the baseline is 11 million illegal alien workers in this country, and we still have one of the highest workforce non-participation rates in modern history. So how many more illegal workers will we need in order to help American citizens? What do you think the perfect number would be there?
Again, I just reject the entire premise of the question. So you can keep asking it, but
no. I'm trying to get to what you're saying. You're saying we need more illegals here because it helps our economy. We have 11 million.
The economy,
how many more will we need?
I'm trying to answer the question in the only way that I can, which is based on facts, right? And the fact is that immigrants help grow the economy. That's what brings people into the workforce. That's what creates jobs.
Oh, and I'm responding with actual facts by telling you that hasn't worked. So I'm just wondering what would work. Let me ask you this. If you say we face no threat at all from illegal immigrants in this country and our fears are rooted in bigotry or whatever, they're irrational, and that we don't need a wall, well, that's the supposition. I mean, a lot of people are afraid of illegal immigration. You're saying we have no reason to be, so clearly it's irrational, in your opinion. Then why wouldn't we follow the lead of a lot of your fellow Democrats and abolish ICE? Are you for that?
Well, certainly if we look at the fact that we haven't had ICE, we didn't have ICE prior to 9/11, right? So we've certainly been able to do
the same thing.
We've been able to do, well, no, right? It wasn't part of this super agency at DHS. Which creates what we've seen in the transition to ICE is a real cowboy behavior, this sense of people acting on their own outside of constitutional requirements. So I can see absolutely why Senator Harris would raise such a concern. So
do you think it's a legitimate thing to say, let's abolish ICE? I mean, yes or no? Pretty simple question. You think it is?
I think I answered it. I said I think Kamala Harris raised very serious issues, and I think they should seriously be considered. I think that's
good. I mean, I just want to make sure. Look, I don't want to misquote you, and I think our viewers and the country should know what the position is of the progressive left on ICE, and you just explained it, and I appreciate that. Henry, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tucker.
A video going viral on the left shows a mother being arrested by ICE, those cowboys you just heard of. It's a pretty upsetting video, and for that reason it's getting wide play on the left, but a key detail is being left out. The woman in that video, Perla Morales Luna, isn't simply some random illegal alien pulled off the street by those cowboys. She's suspected by the feds of organizing a human trafficking operation. Mark Krikorian is executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies, and he joins us tonight. I don't know if I've seen coverage as dishonest as this in a long time. I mean, this is the definition of propaganda. If you show that video and take out the context, it's a little bit like showing the man standing in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square without the tank. It totally changes the meaning of the image, correct?
Of course, and that's kind of the point. I mean, this happened near the border, about 10 miles north of the border. There are illegal immigrants all over National City, California, where this happened.
Right.
The Border Patrol, if they wanted to randomly arrest illegal immigrants, which they don't waste their time with, they wouldn't have done this. They knew that this woman was involved in a smuggling ring. and they sought her out. They tried to get in touch with her before. She didn't respond. Apparently when they confronted her on the street, she tried to flee. She tried to get in another car and drive away. So that, and she's resisting arrest, as you can see here. So, the Border Patrol did its job here. Yes, it's an upsetting video because everybody's yelling and screaming, but, this woman put herself in this situation by working with these criminal smuggling rings.
Well, apparently, I don't think that the case has reached its conclusion, but I guess the point would be there was a reason for this. She wasn't just some hapless victim on the street. So you just heard, I believe, the head of immigration studies at the largest progressive think tank, the Center for American Studies, say that progress, rather, that we ought to seriously entertain getting rid of ICE. This is a new talking point on the left. What would happen if we did that?
What would happen? Who would be enforcing the immigration laws? I mean, that's the real question here, because the Border Patrol does its job well, and they'll probably call for getting rid of the Border Patrol next, but the Border Patrol does a good job at and near the border. But most immigration enforcement happens inside the country. Who does that? ICE does that. So what they're saying is that, in effect, once you get past the Border Patrol, you should be home free. And this isn't some new thing. I mean, this is essentially what Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders said during the campaign, that any illegal immigrant who gets into the United States, who doesn't actually kill somebody, isn't convicted of a violent felony, that's the way she put it, should be allowed to stay. So this really is not some kind of offbeat outlier opinion. This has become the position of the standard position of the left, and it really shows how radicalized the Democratic Party has become.
Support that? Is there broad support for eliminating all border security?
Of course not. I mean, obviously not. And this is why, in some sense, Republicans should encourage Democrats to run on this platform of abolishing ICE.
Because they're not very smart and they seek their own demise, they won't run on this, will they?
Some of them might, but generally speaking, no. I mean, there's a reason the Democrats are the evil party and the Republicans are the stupid party, that they wouldn't take advantage of this. And it's not even as though they would need to, exaggerate or use hyperbole. They really just need to let the progressives say
I agree.
what they actually think.
I'm for getting rid of the military. I'm taking an affirmative position in favor of our enemies. How is this different? I mean, I don't think it is.
Well, they don't believe in borders or immigration.
Well, I'm glad they're saying it, by the way. I'm serious.
I agree.
I think it's worth it, always, to be honest. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has become the latest departure from the Trump administration. What does it mean going forward? Does it have meaning? Brit Hume is next. I made a mistake in the last segment, and I want to correct it immediately. Senator Kamala Harris of California did not call for ending ICE. Actually, she mounted kind of a defense of ICE as a former prosecutor, and good for her. Others on the left have called for it, but we shouldn't have said that she has. Well, polls have now closed in Pennsylvania's special congressional election. We're watching for the results, and of course, we'll keep you apprised of all developments through the night on Fox. Today, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson became the latest departure from the Trump administration. President Trump announced his firing via a morning tweet. The president says he plans to nominate CIA Director Mike Pompeo to be the new State Department secretary, while Deputy CIA Director Gina Haspel will be nominated to run that agency. Afterward, President Trump had this to say about Rex Tillerson.
Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same.
Secretary Tillerson himself, meanwhile, said this.
My commission as Secretary of State will terminate at midnight, March the 31st. Between now and then, I will address a few administrative matters related to my departure and work towards a smooth and orderly transition for Secretary of State designate Mike Pompeo.
Fox senior political analyst Brit Hume joins us tonight. Brit, there's an awful lot going on, so I just want to go in order through a couple of stories. First, Tillerson, what do you make of this?
Well, it does show that you cannot disagree with the president on major foreign policy issues, to wit the Iran deal, and last forever. And there are other differences as well, and plus the fact, Tucker, that the State Department can be a pretty bulky place. And this president is nowhere near the first president who's had trouble getting his arms around it and getting control of it. There's a good argument to whether Tillerson did either over there, but there's always this question with secretaries of state. Are they representing the State Department to the White House or the White House to the State Department? And I think that the feeling in this administration and this White House was that Tillerson had become, to some extent at least, a creature of the building, although he wasn't thought over there to be all that popular. So his days were probably numbered. It's regrettable, Tucker, because it means we'll have a period of delay while Mike Pompeo gets installed and goes through this arduous confirmation process. The same will be true for his deputy, who's now supposed to take over at CIA. And that leaves a period in which the agencies are not functioning in the way that their new leaders will want them to. And it's regrettable at this, still early stage of this administration that they're still getting the right people in place.
Yeah, it is regrettable. What do you make of the report, the majority report from the Intel Committee yesterday that found no collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin?
I think it's probably correct that committee did find no collusion. And I would note, Tucker, this is in the face of all the criticism that House Intel Committee and its majority have received, that meanwhile, over in the sainted Senate Intelligence Committee, its chairman, Richard Burr of North Carolina, Republican of North Carolina, said to a television interview in the last day or so that investigation, which has been thought to be very much more sober and bipartisan and better, had come so far essentially the same conclusion. And I think there's a good reason for that. In all likelihood, there was no collusion, and there's been no evidence of it so far. And I think that piece of their conclusion is probably correct. And I noticed that even Adam Schiff of California, who's been a dogged dissenter and one might say a very partisan one on that House committee, even he, in denouncing the conclusions, all he said was the investigation should continue. He did not say that he or that committee has evidence that would dispute or even refute the committee's conclusion on collusion.
That's a good point. He called it a tragic milestone, but didn't explain why. And finally, the special election in Pennsylvania tonight, a district outside Pittsburgh. The president won by 20 points. Seems very tight tonight. What does this mean? Are we inflating its meaning, undervaluing it? What do you think?
Well, it's such an odd election, Tucker, that I would hesitate to draw major conclusions from it. Certainly, the closeness of the race is a sign of the force of the protest vote that will come out to vote for the Democrat because of Mr. Trump. I don't think there's much question about that. In addition, they have this young and rather attractive candidate on the Democratic side and a somewhat dowdy character on the Republican side. And this is also conducted to some extent in the shadow of the departure of the previous Republican incumbent who left amid a sex scandal. Yes. That always casts a pall over his party's nominee in a special election of this kind. But bear in mind that this is an election to fill a seat between now and basically next November, in which there'll be a whole new district because of redistricting, and this district will go away. So legislatively, it's pretty insignificant, but it will be seen as a bellwether on both sides, depending on who wins. No doubt about it.
It's interesting that the Democrat is running away from the gun issue, which I think a lot of Democrats think is a winner for them, but not this one, apparently.
Oh yeah, he certainly is, and and he's saying he won't back Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. He's trying to convince the people in that district. Well, it's a majority Democratic district. It's been hospitable to Republicans for a long time now, and it's certainly been considered a safe red district. He hasn't run away from the party on everything. I gather he did not support the tax cut, which I think the benefits of which may be starting to be felt in that district. So we'll see what effect that has. But there's a lot of cross currents here, Tucker. It's an unusual race.
Brett Hume, the voice of reason in a turbulent world. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, Tucker.
Hillary Clinton touring India and revealing a lot about what she thinks about you. Her pretty astonishing remarks next. Polls have closed in that special election in Pennsylvania. We're now just waiting to hear who won. The results are coming in now. Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, thousands of miles away in India. As a result, she figures it's safe to say what she really thinks about you. Watch.
His whole campaign, Make America Great Again, was looking backwards. You didn't like black people getting rights. You don't like women, getting jobs. You don't want to, see that Indian American succeeding more than you are. Whatever your problem is, I'm going to solve it. We don't do well with married white women. And part of that is an identification with the Republican Party and a sort of ongoing pressure to vote the way that your husband, your boss, your son, whoever, believes you should.
Well, notice who Hillary Clinton did not blame for her loss: herself, or her ideas, or anything she's ever said or done. But it is a mistake, though, to make this about Hillary Clinton. She's a figure of the past, but her ideas are very much a feature of the present. The clip you just heard precisely sums up the view of the left in America right now. A bigoted middle class is holding back progress. They believe that. So the Democratic Party, voters in the middle of the country don't have legitimate views or aspirations. They have only ugly gut reactions. They're racists and dumb people. White women, as Hillary Clinton said. They can't think for themselves. They're puppets of their husbands and sons. Worst of all, they're attached to those stubborn little cells of independence called families. And nothing stands in the way of power like families, so they must be smashed. That's the message. Hillary may be washed up, but she understands perfectly well what the goals are. Julie Alvin is Lifestyle Director at the Meredith Corporation. She joins us tonight. Julie, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I don't want to beat up on Hillary Clinton, and I mean that, actually.
I thought that's why you bring me on.
No, I'm actually sincere. I feel, look, she lost. I always feel sorry for the loser. I think she's become less popular among Democrats. She's humiliating herself. So I don't want to pound on her, but I do want to talk about the ideas. I'm really struck because I think she's the perfect sort of embodiment of an attitude that pervades the Democratic Party right now, which is, we lost, and it's your fault. You're bigots. You're standing in the way of progress, America. And I think that's what do you think of that attitude? It's everywhere.
I don't think it's a fair attitude. I think one valid point that a lot of people make when talking about a lot of the statements that Hillary Clinton makes is that she doesn't necessarily talk about the tactical errors that her team made as far as campaigning, as far as appealing to the middle of the country. So, while I certainly am personally against the administration that's currently in office and a lot of the things that I believe that they stand for,
right.
I think that the Democrats also need to account for the errors that they made during the 2016 election. I
don't know, though, because I hear that a lot. I know all the people who worked, the top people on the Hillary campaign. They're really smart. They're all smarter than I am. They had $1 billion. There wasn't really a lot of tactical thinking that they didn't, that they weren't aware of. Like, they did the tactics right.
I don't know. I don't know that they did. I mean, I'm not here to necessarily argue about the problems with the Democratic Party, but I don't think they necessarily did.
Could the problem have been that they didn't understand that the middle class of the country was dying in absolute terms and felt hated and dismissed by them? That maybe was the problem, don't you think?
Well, I think when I talk about a tactical issue, I think that not appealing to that middle part of the country, not understanding how to deliver the economic messaging that would really resonate with those people, I think that was a tactical error, yes.
I would say it's a thematic error. It's kind of a deep error. What do you think of Hillary's line? And again, I'm not beating up on her, but I think this kind of gets to one of the core contradictions in modern feminism. That white women, as she said, with disdain, voted for Trump because they were pressured by their husbands and sons. She thinks that women are so weak-minded that they're bossed around by their sons in the voting booth. Doesn't that tell you a lot? Isn't that revealing?
Well, as much as I hate that soundbite from her, and I wish that, it makes it sound as though women are incapable of making their own decisions when it comes to the voting booth. But as much as I wish this weren't true, there actually is data to back that up. There was a study by Oregon State University a couple of years ago that said that women, and specifically white women, are unduly pressured by their partners when it comes to making political decisions. And generally that women happen to, basically women, when they are unmarried, they tend to vote with the good of their gender in mind, whereas once they become married, they are more likely to vote in their husband's best economic interests. And this is largely because women hold less money and earn less money and hold less power in this country. And there actually is evidence to back up the fact that women, when married, and specifically white women, tend to vote with their husband's economic interest in mind, and that is perceived to be, for white women at least, voting Republican.
I wonder, so if you have a group of people, married white people, and you spend like a huge amount of time attacking them on the basis of their race and their marital status, as the Democratic Party and its surrogates do constantly.
They attack married people?
Well, sure. Well, of course, because that's not their constituency. I mean, their policies are aimed at the unmarried because married people don't vote for them. And, of course, they attack people explicitly.
I think that's vastly untrue.
Last week, Chuck Schumer said he wasn't going to support a federal judicial nominee because he was white. And I just wonder, like, is that what do you think the net effect of that is? Is that good for the country for politicians to say that kind of thing out loud?
Well, I think that you're mischaracterizing the fact that Republicans, or excuse me, that Democrats are not trying to appeal to married people. That's a huge swath of the population. I think that they're trying to appeal to a specific ideology, and that is an ideology that is adopted by both married and unmarried people.
Well, I like married women, and I think I have a higher opinion of women than you do, and I'm not a feminist. I mean, I think they kind of vote the way they want to vote. That's the ones I know do.
I mean, I think that is by and large true, and I think that some of the things that Hillary Clinton said oversimplified it in that particular instance. But there is a little bit of data, unfortunately, and I wish it were not the case to back up what she said there.
You're a brave woman to say that on TV. Julie, thank you. Good to see you.
You too.
A handful of powerful and omnipresent tech companies don't simply dominate the marketplace, they increasingly control our daily lives and what we think and what we're capable of thinking. Is it time to break them up? One writer who studied the issue says, yes, it is. He joins us next. Plus, the results are coming in. We'll update you again on the Pennsylvania special election after this. If you grew up in this country, you heard the stories of the old robber barons from the 19th century who crushed the aspirations of ordinary people. Rockefeller, Standard Oil, Carnegie, U.S. Steel, all the rest of them. Their companies were massive and powerful, and at the time, they seemed to bend the entire country to their will. But that's over, or is it? Today, Amazon, Google, and Facebook, also Apple, aren't just richer and more powerful than the old monopolies or any companies that have ever existed throughout human history. They also have far more control over our daily lives. What should we do about it? Scott Galloway is professor of marketing at NYU's Stern School of Business. He just wrote a great piece for Esquire calling for the breakup of the tech titans' biggest companies. Scott Galloway joins us tonight. Scott, thanks for coming on.
Tucker, thanks for having me.
So you took a forensic look at these companies and their effect on the American economy and American life, and your conclusion was break them up?
That's correct. Yeah, I think we're at a part of the economic cycle where the economy needs to be oxygenated again. I don't think they've done anything wrong, if you will. I just think the economy of innovation that we've become dependent upon has gotten to a point where small companies have difficulty getting out of the crib and big companies are being euthanized before they should, because these companies basically choke off capital, and it's effectively can engage in anti-competitive behavior, which any company does when it's given the assets and the scale of these companies. So I think it's time.
We've got a whole lot of laws against that, federal laws. But Google, for example, which has a chokehold on basically all human information, everything you could know is on Google, and they have, in effect, a monopoly on search. That seems like too much power for any organization to have. They've got to misuse it. Why hasn't Congress done anything to reduce that power and the threat to the rest of us?
Well, that's the correct question. Google, 92% of a market that by dollar volume is bigger than the entire advertising market of any nation, and with the exception of the U.S., and it'll probably blow by the ad market of the U.S. just in 2 years. Basically because current antitrust law is based on the premise that if it's good for the consumer, then it's good for society. And that's what we're wrestling with right now, because most people would have a difficult time arguing that Google isn't good for the consumer. The problem is we don't know what we don't know, and that is we don't know what companies would have emerged if we didn't have a duopoly where 2/3 of all digital spend go to Facebook or Google, and that's 104% of all growth. So if you work in digital marketing and you don't work for one of the two, you join magazines and newspapers, and that you're in a business that's in structural decline.
So that essentially means that between Facebook and Google, all digital news is really controlled. The purse strings are controlled by two companies. I mean, that's not a threatening concentration of power?
I believe it is a threatening concentration of power. I believe that if Fox or News Corp had been weaponized by an intelligence arm of the Russian government, they would have incurred huge fines and advertisers would have abandoned the network. But in the case of Facebook, you have two companies that control almost all traffic and all e-commerce and your presence on the web. So if it's not a monopoly, it's a monopsony. And advertisers have no choice. So there is too much power in the hands of these companies. I don't think they're evil. I don't think they've done anything wrong. I think they do what companies are supposed to do. They're growing their earnings. But I think at some point referees need to step in, throw a yellow flag. And I believe these companies would be better for the economy, broader tax base, more jobs, maybe fewer billionaires but more millionaires if there were 11 or 12 companies instead of the 4 we're discussing here today.
Yeah. I don't think there's a serious conversation about that on Capitol Hill right now, but I hope you spark one. Scott, thank you for that.
I appreciate that, Tucker.
Thanks. Well, the UK is welcoming home ISIS fighters, literally people who fought for ISIS, but the UK will not let conservatives visit the country. They're turned away at the airport. Not making that up. We'll be right back.
This program.
Well, after 14 months, Republican members of the House Intelligence Committee finally completed a draft report in which they determined that there was no collusion between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin during the 2016 campaign. Philip Mudd is a former CIA official who now spends an awful lot of time yapping on cable news. He hasn't actually read that report, but that didn't stop him from passing swift and certain judgment on it, or in general from acting like a lunatic on television. And it was not the first time. Watch this.
If this report were written on toilet paper, I wouldn't stoop to wipe my with it. Conversation, Wolf, has to transition to how do we understand what the President of the United States says to understanding that these are circus clown remarks.
I am a proud holder. My family was called I'm proud of that. We came when people from Ireland and Italy were seen as dirty people, dirty Catholics who didn't belong in a Protestant country.
Whoa. Well, the next time you hear some idiot reporter lavishing praise on the so-called intelligence community and reminding you it's unpatriotic to question their conclusions, keep in mind that Philip Mudd is who they're talking about, the unbalanced guy you see screaming on CNN. He's the one we're trusting with our most sensitive secrets, he and a lot of his like-minded friends. There are now 4 former CIA officers running for Congress this year as Democrats, and liberals could not be more thrilled. Suddenly, they love the CIA. They love all large, secretive institutions that undermine democracy. They think crazy old Phil Mudd is excellent. You're the one they're worried about. Well, the UK is blocking conservatives from visiting that country. They say conservatives could be hazardous to the nation's diversity somehow. This past weekend, American YouTube personality Brittany Pettibone and her Austrian boyfriend were barred from entering the UK because they planned to interview Tommy Robinson, an outspoken critic of Islam. Then on Monday, British police halted a visit by Canadian journalist Lauren Southern on the grounds she was, quote, a radical Christian and therefore possibly a terrorist. Meanwhile, radical Muslims, more than 400 former ISIS fighters, are believed to have re-entered Britain without any problem at all. Indeed, they were welcomed. Huh? Katie Hopkins is a columnist with The Rebel. She wrote the book Rude, and she joins us now. Katie, it's great to see you. I mean, only a country that really hates itself, its heritage, its own people, would act like this.
It's absolute madness, Tucker. I can't even tell you. For the regular British man or woman in the street, they're just shaking their heads and going, what has this country come to? We're welcoming back the mad mullahs. We're welcoming back the jihadis after they've done their jihad in Iraq or Syria. And by the way, they're not that good at jihad. You know, so you're supposed to blow yourself up if you come back. You probably weren't that great at jihad in the first place. Point. But we are turning away conservatives who just want to stand up for being Christian conservatives. And our Home Office here has sided with the Islamists of Luton. We seem to have some new blasphemy laws here in the UK that we didn't really know about, but are certainly being enforced.
Blasphemy laws that are applied to Christians, but not to Muslims. So what undergirds this? So, of course, for centuries, Britain sent forth Anglican missionaries to spread Christianity around the world. And by the way, they did. And now they would not let those same people in their own country in favor of ISIS members. What animates this? Why the change? Why do they feel this way?
There's this pervasive thought that's spread amongst liberals, it's amongst the Labour Party, the Democrats, if you will, and the Conservatives. We have a Conservative government in power. You wouldn't believe it. It seems to be that being white is considered wrong. Being Christian is considered wrong. Trump is wrong. And then there's a list of right answers. To be Islamic is right. To welcome back jihadis is right. We shouldn't prosecute them. We should embrace them. And it's really getting to a point here in the UK where, you know, we're up there on the endangered species list. To be a white, Christian, conservative woman like myself, I'm right up there on the endangered, you know, animals list, up there with the black rhino. And the black rhino has got an advantage because he's black.
So, I mean, the UK is a democracy, purportedly. You voted for Brexit. You still get to vote there for the time being. The majority of your population, I would bet you my car, does not agree with the policies I just described. Why are they putting up with them?
There's this kind of sense right now, this place, this country has never been this tense. It feels like a pressure cooker, you know, and someone's screwing down the lid. And there's going to be a tipping point. And that feeling of just people going to be rising up to say, right, no more of this. We will not be silenced anymore. And the thing is, people hold on to certain voices. There's a lot of support for these YouTubers that you spoke of that were banned. Yes. And when you start silencing the people that were even, you know, finally speaking out for us, people like myself, in fact, I'm surprised I'm still here. I'm surprised I haven't been deported. You know, them people, there will come a point where enough is enough. And I think there will be some kind of uprising, because watching Conservatives being detained for 2 days, being charged with kind of, or detained on terror, suspicion of terror offences, when they're just young Conservatives with a passion for their culture and a passion for their country. It really is such a disappointing time for the UK. Yeah. And I do think there needs to be much more of an attitude where we stop tiptoeing around the cultures that choose to come and join us and start defending the culture they have chosen to join.
It used to be kind of a free country. That's authoritarian, what you're describing. And I'm sorry. Katie, thank you for coming on and telling us about that. It sounded familiar. Votes are coming in tonight from the special election in Pennsylvania. Polls closed 51 minutes ago. We will discuss the results and their implications with Brett Baer, who joins us next.